The Gi Spot. I'd hit that.
Welcome to the Gi Spot podcast. My name's Rachael Bradshaw and I'm a black belt in Jiu Jitsu.
Hello, I'm Kaz Page and I'm a purple belt in Jiu Jitsu. And we're back.
How are you today?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Excellent.
Retrospective, how was your week?
Amazing.
Why?
Went camping.
With who?
With all of you and a couple of other families, and it was amazing weather and it was just beautiful people, and it was great to get away and switch off completely from social media, the academy, everything.
Do you know there was 9 families with us?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did the count the other day. There was 9 families. It was awesome. And it was a huge big circle.
Yep.
It's probably, although I didn't make it to midnight, it's one of the best midnights I've had in a long time. I heard you all cheering because I only went to bed like 22. But
Oh, you're a quitter.
I know. I'm old. I'm the oldest person here. Give me a break.
But you know that at 12:01, everyone went to bed.
Yeah, it was silent.
It was
like,
nice because I'm that guy.
yay.
I'm like, I'll stay up to midnight, I suppose. New Year's just another day to me. Like,
So for those who didn't realise Grant's here,
We were
the
getting to
video might
that.
have given it away. But,
no, it wouldn't have yet.
Welcome, Grant.
oh, hey, how you doing?
And without further ado,
Yeah, we might as well jump right in.
we do have a very special guest
We
in
do.
studio with us today, and that is Grant and my very amazing coach, who we do talk about all the time on this
do.
podcast.
That's true.
Welcome, Luke Beston.
Hi guys, very happy to be here.
Welcome to the table.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for
much.
joining us. It's
Yeah.
a really big honour for us to have you here today. So we
Nervous,
really
but
appreciate it.
okay.
How was your Christmas and New Year's?
It was good. Worked a lot.
Yep.
Yep. So little sleep deprived right now. So hopefully it doesn't show up too much. But yeah, no, working lots of nights, which I'm not used to.
Right.
So,
It's
yeah.
all right. I'll kick you under the table if I
Thank
see
you.
you.
Thank you.
Going to
Yep.
sleep a little bit.
We'll try and keep it a little more entertaining
Yeah, yeah.
than that, hopefully. What are you doing at the moment with yourself, Luke?
So you mean like the night working? I'm doing
Yeah.
back doing security works, which I used to do 30 years ago, and just got back into it recently, and absolutely loving it. Yeah.
So probably one of the scariest security guards in Newcastle.
I'm going to say, I've heard all the stories about you. I pity the fool who takes you on. I really do.
I'm the nice one now. Like I'm the friendly old guy. Like I'm the grandfatherly figure, and they come to me and I wish they were all like you. No,
That's what makes you what you are. You are just a lowly chef. Nothing but a chef.
Steven Seagal, eat your heart out, right?
Got it.
So we've got a really big episode today because we wanted to look at lineage through jiu-jitsu
Yep.
and what it means. I mean, it's a pretty big day when you've got 3 very big black belts sitting at the table with me. I think I might just have to go and hide in a
I
corner.
was going to say,
at one
I'm not a
point.
big black belt.
But you've earned the black belt, right? Like when was the last time?
I'm not a big one.
No,
I'm a little
you're
one.
just little.
And in present company, I'm like a baby.
baby black belt.
Super baby black belt, yeah.
So we're going to start with you, Luke, and like we were talking about before we kicked off, one of the biggest questions that I really wanted to get insight from you is, what does jiu-jitsu mean to you?
So like we were talking about before, pretty much everything. Like I talk about jiu-jitsu, but the martial arts in general for me, because I do other things, it kind of defines who I am. I don't like to be that person, but without it, I'd be a very, very different person today. Went from someone, we can talk about later, like from someone who they were ready to pull out of school and very, very early and just ride off kind of thing, to someone who finished school, finished uni, traveled the world, met my wife, did lots of cool things, all because of the martial arts. Everything I've done is kind of, like I say, it's jiu-jitsu's credit, not my credit, just because, that's really what it is.
What are some of the other things that you do?
I mean, like from a kid who was like scared to leave the house because of getting bullied, to like working security like I am now,
Yeah.
travel anxiety to travel the world, teaching in other continents, meeting my wife, my whole family-in-law kind of thing through that, all the travels I got to do because I finished uni and got to work in a corporation and stuff like that. If it wasn't for the martial arts, none of that would have ever happened, not in a million years. Yeah.
And is jiu-jitsu the only martial arts that you've done?
No, started with Taekwondo back
Okay.
in the day, like as a kid, and
So,
did that.
so
yeah.
how old were you? And sorry, who was Luke before martial arts came into it? How old were you when you sort of came to martial arts?
So I started training around 14, 15, but always been obsessed with, even as a kid, like karate books, karate movies, karate this, karate that. the stories like my mum was really big on reading. She was, as long as you were reading anything, she was happy, and that's a big credit to her. Like my passion of reading has served me well in so many things as well. But she would just get me any karate book, any karate magazine I wanted, and karate moves. And then one day she goes, you know, you're really into this karate stuff. You're always playing karate by yourself in the backyard. Why don't you actually go and do karate? She called it karate.
Yeah.
So I signed up at the local. I was like, you know, you're right. You know, I'll go and do that because, you know, and she brought up at the right time, you know, because I'd just been bullied a lot. And if she had brought up earlier, I probably would have said, no, I don't want to do it. And if she had brought up later, I'd be like, I don't care about it. It was just the right time. So, you know, I'm going to do it. And then the rest is history. So I did that.
So what did you start in?
Taekwondo. So it's just the primary school I went to around the corner. And very good coach. I've been lucky to have very good coaches the whole way along. And that was by pure chance. So it was a Taekwondo, which, you know, people have different opinions on, but my instructor was an amazing guy. He did security work. He was like a bouncer at a club in town, like, and I was just a kid, but, you know, he had a very realistic perspective, and, you know, he would always throw in like tips and stuff like that, and very grounded. And from the Taekwondo, I still take a lot of lessons away from that, like the discipline and the, you know, the regimented nature of it, like, still serves me well when I'm dealing with other people. You know, learn to get hit kind of thing, which is, you know, it was never, like, same as you said, I was never that tough, but like I learned to kind of take a beating kind of in a nice way. You know, I don't regret that training for one second. I'm really glad I had that and probably started with it. Yeah.
So from Taekwondo, what was next, or where did you start to lean into jiu-jitsu?
Pretty much straight after UFC 1. That was like all the people of my generation. That was like the before and after. The world changed when UFC 1 came out. There was no internet then, really. Certainly not like today. So no social media. There was just the magazines that would come out, and we'd see these magazines, these articles on UFC 1, UFC 2. And then we got the videos. And that was in 92? Well, 93 was the first UFC. Right. Yeah, so I started reading about it then, and then started training in 94. Yeah.
Were you doing Taekwondo all the way up to that, or had you walked?
And including, yeah. So at the beginning, I was doing both. Like, it's a long time ago now. So I did like a year of judo at uni. That was the closest thing I could find. And then there was I found these guys, the Newcastle Submission Grappling Club, and they were in a Scout Hall, Sensei Ian Wright. Okay. And Neil Bodycott had a school over at near the showgrounds in Newcastle. It was an old Scout Hall at the karate school, and they would put down mats twice a week. And they were amazing. Again, just so lucky to run into these people. Like, Ian was my first supervisor when I started bouncing, and still friends with him today. Neil's passed away, sadly. He fought in the first Australian UFC. So just this little kid happened to hang around some very, very cool individuals. So, yeah, really lucky. Yeah.
And how old were you then?
18, I think.
Right.
Yeah, just as soon as I got my car, as soon as I get my car, I'm going to go to this school. I'm looking at the back of Blitz magazine or whatever, like where's the nearest school, where can I drive to and stuff like that. Yeah. So train with them, and then also out at Rutherford with Sean Kirkwood. That's where I started like shoot fighting and BJJ proper.
So 93, 94?
This would have been 95 at this stage. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And Grant, what were you doing around this time?
94,
Because you guys are about the same age, right?
Similar, yeah. I had a similar experience, Luke, in terms of growing up, like watching a lot of. I mean, at the time, it was we all started off with Karate Kid. And then that went to Best of the Best and American Ninja and Kickboxer and Bloodsport and all that. I loved all the martial arts movies, but I was busy in the more conventional sports. So 94, 95, I was huge. I was still in the back end of playing soccer, and then I switched over to playing water polo heaps and heaps and heaps. And I didn't actually start martial arts myself until 99 or 2000, maybe it was, when I started doing capoeira. And that was really funny. It was something I'd always seen and love the idea of it, not from the how to fight perspective, but from the sheer beauty of it, the mobility, the agility, the rhythm. I think we've talked before on here, you know, I'm kind of musical, so the fact that there was the musical element of capoeira as well. But to be fair, by the time I'd started that, I'd also seen the first couple of UFCs, those $10 videotapes that you used to get in Westfield, and was kind of enamored with anything and everything that is Brazil. And at the time, I was still living in Sydney. So there were, surprisingly, people kind of think, well, Sydney would have been where it started in Australia and all this, that and the other. There were still only 3 or 4 academies in Sydney when I sort of became aware of the UFC and aware of jiu-jitsu and mixed martial. Well, it wasn't even mixed martial arts. I was thinking about that the other day. So I got into capoeira as almost an adjunct to tide me over until I could find jiu-jitsu.
Because you started jiu-jitsu on the Central Coast, right?
I started jiu-jitsu on the Central Coast in January 2006 because I believe Luke got his black belt in December 2005. Does that sound about right? So I actually, those names that that Luke was mentioning before, you know, Ian Wright, Neil, Sean, all those guys, in the early 2000s, I think it's fair to say that the internet, even though it was nothing on what it is today, that really kept the sport of no holds barred, mixed martial arts, what people call the UFC, alive. It really is the first sport born of the internet generation. Mm-hmm. So I knew who Luke Beston was and felt like I knew Luke Beston. Don't worry, I saw through that for a number of years. And then, as I said, when I was living in Sydney, there were only 3 or 4 places. And Sydney's a big place. So even though there's 3, 4 academies, the nearest ones were near enough to an hour from me away. Yep. So it was like, look, too hard. Moved to Central Coast in 2005 with Rach. We spent a year getting married, you know, just building our roots in the area. And then I was like, I've always wanted to do this jiu-jitsu thing. This Luke Beston guy, I know of him. He respects all styles. He's a fantastic guy.
How did you know of him?
The internet.
Let's talk about that.
But why? Why were you on the internet,
on
Luke?
what platform?
Why were you on the internet, Luke? Who let you on there?
I was hacked. Brazilian hackers, it wasn't me.
So you knew of him before he was a black belt?
Yeah. Yep.
What were you doing, Luke, between sort of purple belt to black belt?
I thought you were going to say, what were you doing on the internet, Luke?
Yeah, Luke, what were you doing? No, why? What? Obviously, you entrenched yourself into this martial arts. What was it then that brought you to the surface for people down in Sydney? You're in Newcastle. Yep. And for those that are overseas that don't know, Newcastle to Sydney, that's a good 3 hours back in this day that we're talking. And so, you know, it's not like without a lot of internet around as well back in the day, it's not like it would have been a common throw for you to know. So what were you doing?
So there's kind of 2 parts there. So the first of all, at the time, blue and purple was as high as it got around. So, and the other guys were much, much better than me, but I was just training long enough to happen to have the same belt as all these like badasses. But the real story is like I used to goof around on the internet, used to.
You've changed, man.
And back in the day, it wasn't social media. It was like everyone had their name, but I used my real name. I thought the famous people, they use their real name. One day I'm going to be famous. I'll use my real name. And just the Australian sense of humour kind of went over well or poorly, depending on who you talk to, with people around the world. Just on these like discussion forums for like kind of before Reddit and stuff like that, but just place where people would talk and argue on the internet. Still,
and that
people argue on the internet.
Yeah,
that was on the underground.
That was the underground
forum.
Yep.
Is that still running, the underground?
It is. I haven't been on there for years.
I got banned. So.
That's another
That's right. A couple of people used to ask me about where Luke Beston was, and I would report that you were in fact still alive.
Yep.
And a few people wanted you back on there. A few.
I can tell you that you can actually do a search on the underground and come up with all of your past posts.
Yeah.
So they may have banned you, but they left all your content on there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Have to check it out. Yeah.
You have to create
Were
a new
you fiery on this underground thing?
No, because that was the thing. I would not take anything seriously, and and I found it very amusing. Like when other people took it seriously, that was kind of my one joy in life. You
and my husband would get along very well.
Dry is what, and this was a big part of it. I mean, so many people in this, especially back in the day, so many people who were into jiu-jitsu were these real hard-ass fighters, bouncers, you know, street dudes, whatever. And the fact that this just seemed like another really dry Aussie, good sense of humour. It was basically, you know, good looking, flowing locks, all of these kinds of things. I was like, I actually want to learn from this dude. And the fact that he's only 20 minutes down the road, because we're talking about Central Coast and, Sydney and Newcastle. Yeah. Well, at the time, Luke had a permanent visitor's visa to the Central Coast. Right. So we let him down here as often as he wanted. And at the time, that's where he was running classes. So I was, just like you said, that you were right place, right time. It was right place, right time for me as well.
So I just want to go back a step. You made a comment before when you were talking about Taekwondo. Mm-hmm. And then obviously through Jiu-Jitsu, you've made a comment that you were very fortunate to have good coaches. And I sitting here right now, I can tell you in the year and a bit now that I've known these guys, it's I don't think a week or a day goes by where they don't reference you as being their beacon, their coach, their all in. But obviously it rubs off because we now have phenomenal coaches for myself, my husband and our family. And hopefully we're doing their school justice when we step on and do that for them as well. What does it mean when you say you were fortunate to have good coaches? Break down a good coach for me.
Wow. Break down a good coach. Yeah, I just know in hindsight now, just to go back, it's not me to answer your question indirectly, but just going back, because I've seen a lot of coaches, you can see people on the internet, I've traveled visited lots of schools, I'm like, wow, I really won the lotto. Started with like Neil and Ian, like in the jiu-jitsu. John Will, was the first black belt in Australia.
Okay.
Brilliant martial arts, maybe, one of the greatest of our generation, for sure one of the greatest of our generation as a coach, as a martial artist. And then Sean, who was his representative here, we all took a page out of John's book. If you watch him speak and watch Sean speak, and hopefully if you watch me speak, you'll see we have a lot of same mannerisms even and stuff, just because John is just such a brilliant coach. I think what sets them apart is they were just so passionate about their students. Like one thing that John Will impressed on Sean, impressed on me early was like, these people have made major sacrifice in terms of earning a living to pay for your fees. They're spending time away from their family. You owe them nothing less than the absolute best every time you step on the mat, to give anything and everything, and give them your full attention or full presence when you teach. And I think that's what the coaches, the good coaches are, and that's the other day, or not the other day, maybe a few years ago, I was talking with Alex Prades, who's like Whitaker's coach, and Ricardo Laborio, who's the head of American Top Team. And I'm like, okay, I've got the coach of 2 UFC champions sitting right in front of me. And I was like, what is it? I asked them the exact same question. What is it that makes you such a good coach, or good coaches, or train so many champions? And they said at the same time, almost like jinx. And they didn't look at each other like, you have to care about your students. They said the same thing. And I think that's what they did. They cared about it. So from every angle, from how they ran the academy to how they presented things to how they encouraged and discouraged certain things, is because they cared about the students first and foremost. It wasn't a form of income or something as to make themselves feel important and things like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what about you?
I'm just going to piggyback on what Luke says, because people who are listening today will realise that he's actually the most humble person. He is the most humble person I know. The role modelling that Luke's done for us has been, as he said, you've got to put your students first. But I really like what he said in terms of, these people are making all these sacrifices for you, so you owe them nothing less. Well, this is a guy who, when he wants to learn a martial art, finds the best proponents that he possibly can to study of it. So you can say it's luck, and the initial where we landed on the planet, who the coaches are within 15 minutes of your luck, absolutely. But to seek out your Burton Richardsons, to seek out your Ray Floros, to search out Gary with wrestling, to search out the plethora of jiu-jitsu folk that you've learned from directly. I know Rach is going to talk about some of that later, and that then we've had the fortune to train with. Yeah, there was an element of luck, but there's also that coach who drives the idea of, I'm always a student, I'm always learning, and there's no one who I can't learn from. So that's except blue belts, because they can't learn anything, and therefore we can't learn much from them. Actually, we had a good one today, but we'll save that for another time. Aiden, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so
the biggest thing I think's rubbed off onto Grant from Luke is the perpetual bullying of blue belts in the academy.
So that's a Luke thing. That's you.
Oh, very much.
Started that.
Yes. Yeah.
And off your own bat, or you got
it's
that from
all an extension
else?
of the trolling and stuff. No, I'm not a troll, but
not and troll, please.
Just because martial arts, you can, depending, if you take it very seriously, it can take you to kind of dark places. Like I train Kali as well, which is sticks and knives, and even that tends to attract some Fruit Loops and stuff like that. And again, I'm lucky for my coaches are amazing people, but I think injecting humor in the right place at the right time helps keep you balanced, and keep us in the right place. So we can't be jiu-jitsu and martial arts in general can go from between like you're in a museum or you're in a frat house, and you've got to, you're treading a thin line. And so humor in the right place at the right time. Blue belts are just ready for it. Like if you not bullied, if you goofed off too much with the new people, they wouldn't get it. And the seniors, you have to have respect and kind of things. So the blue belts are just right, to cop it all. So, yeah.
Have you ever got it wrong?
I don't think so. Yeah, I'm very careful. I err on the side of caution, and I also will joke about myself first and foremost. So that I think they know where I'm coming from. Yeah, so. I'd be horrified if I offended someone. Like I'm very, very. Is that what you mean? Like I'm very careful. At the end of the day, people walk out. They know that because that's more important almost than defending themselves. Like why I got into martial arts because people made me feel bad about myself, and if I did that to someone else, I would be very, very upset. So it's very important to me. Everyone knows they feel good about themselves when they leave. Yeah.
That's a
I
massive
feel
thing.
like at Iconic we've had a fairly high retention of blue belts.
I've got to do better.
But I feel like the kind of the digging and like the putting them in their place just a little bit, it kind of gets them on that thing like, blue belts have the reputation of when they get to that level, they will quit. I don't know if you've noticed as you've been a coach throughout the years, but I feel like we have a high retention rate, and I feel it's because they get there and they go, oh, okay, I still suck. And now I've got to get to purple. And then once you get them at purple, you kind of almost got them forever. I don't know if you...
Well, blue belt, statistically, it is one of the biggest drop-off rates.
I think they stick around to prove us wrong.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we can take this. But I think it's very much as well, we were talking about how, what the things that I sort of found in Luke that I wanted to coach. And it's that dry Aussie sense of humour, isn't it? And in a sense, we actually had quite similar upbringings in terms of what made us the people we are and what brought us to martial arts and all those kinds of things, and the experiences at school and all that kind of stuff. But a big part of Australian humour for those people who are listening from overseas is to not take yourself too seriously. And it's almost that sense of the closer you are with someone, the more shit you'll hang on them. But again, that comes with the very fine line. Like I know I've overstepped a couple of times, but I also create an environment where I make sure my guys understand, and I'll say to them from the outset, guys, like if this is too much, like Luke is fundamentally a nice person. I'm not. But
that's where they differ.
If I go too mercilessly at you, just let me know and I'll pull back.
Yeah.
And a couple of guys have gone, hey, I get it, this is really funny, but pick on him for a while.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, done. And then I'll pick on him and they'll smile and then I'll go back to picking. But it's finding that fine line, as you said, between the frat house and the intense guys who want to kill each other, and creating the culture that you want in your academy. You guys talk about this a lot. We talk about this a lot, and we've said on this podcast before, there's the culture that we wanted from the outset is the culture that was at Beston Gracie in Newcastle.
I was actually going to ask you about that, Grant, because I know that coming up under Luke, and we've talked about this, you and I, many, many times in creating Iconic and what we wanted for that, but we always drew inspiration from Luke.
Yeah.
Luke, first of all, I'll come back to you in a second, Grant, but first of all, where did you get your inspiration from, what you wanted out of an academy? Because you ran your academy for 20 years.
Can we go back just a step before you get into that? You got your, Grant said before you got your black belt 2005.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't own your academy at that point, or you did?
Yeah, I've been teaching since brown belt.
In your own academy?
Yep.
Okay.
So remember Luke said, sorry, guys, remember Luke says when he was coming up, there were...
That's my point.
That was it. Yeah, is when I first competed, when I tagged along with Luke in my first competition, the whole tournament stopped for a purple belt match. Yeah. I mean, they cleared all 4 mats. Someone jumped on the microphone, and as far as I could tell with their Brazilian accent, they said the names of these guys. One walked out, the other walked out. Everyone is sitting around on 4 mats.
So it was like a super fight.
It was a super fight, yeah.
At purple belt.
At purple belt.
I think that's something that I really want to zone in on for a second, because that's what, 2006, 2007?
It was 2006.
So we're not talking like it's 40, 50 years ago like they've had in other countries. This is still a baby, respectfully, in this country.
Yeah.
And so you're at brown belt. Who are you training under? How are you progressing through your ranks here in Australia?
So up until brown belt, I got white, blue, purple, brown from Sean Kirkwood and John Will, who are under the Machados. And then it was at purple that I met Angela, my wife, right? So kind of I was training under Sean in Newcastle here, married with Angela, and then she had me training with her family's representatives down in Sydney. So from purple onwards, I was training with Bruno Pano down in Sydney. Every weekend, drive down to Sydney, train, come home. And then, so training under both, and both amazing coaches, both amazing people. It became a bit of a conflict of interest because there was a lot of jiu-jitsu there was a huge rivalries. It was very different, the culture back then. And it was a big conflict of interest for me because I'd be training with one set of friends during the week and then kind of not cheering or whatever the word is against in tournaments against the other. It just, I had to pick a side kind of thing. And of course I'm going to go with my,
your wife's
my
side.
wife. I'll go with my wife over anything.
And
I don't regret that kind of thing. But I was, again, every coach I've had, I was so lucky to have Sean and John Will and stuff like that. Yeah. And they influenced me as much as anyone to this day. Yeah.
And so you and Angela are married.
Yep.
You're now progressing through from brown belt on.
Yep.
And you decide to open a school.
Yep.
Why?
When I made that decision to go with Angela's family and train with them, I started teaching out of my house. So that was where we started in a garage, not as glorious as what you guys have here.
You really have sort of followed the pattern, haven't you? Yep.
And I had my garage downstairs, and again, it's a long time ago now, but I had the club on the Central Coast at that time. So Sean actually, going back to that, Sean had Newcastle and Central Coast, handed over Central Coast to me. So I was running with just Central Coast, and then was teaching out of my house on the other days in Newcastle.
Okay.
Just so everyone knows, so she doesn't sound like she's a bikie or something like that, because you're training with Angela's representatives. Who is Angela?
So Angela Gazio, my wife. So she's the granddaughter of Carlos Gracie, Senior, who learnt from the Japanese. So she's Hoyce's cousin, Hickson's cousin, that kind of stuff, Henzo's cousin. So yeah, went straight in the deep end there. But
really did,
I was good because I knew a bunch of them from my travels and stuff beforehand. So she's got. Well, her mum has 20 brothers and sisters, so there's a big family. But I knew all the names, so I was a good. Yeah. So Carlos had 21 kids. Yeah. So her mum is one of 21. Yeah.
Wow.
I'll point you in the direction of a couple of books that have got the family tree.
That'll take me a really long time.
You got to remember, Kaz, TVs weren't invented. back then, right?
Clearly, obviously, a lot of time.
Yeah.
How did you guys meet?
Internet. Yeah. So. Yeah,
it was that charm.
Did she understand your humour?
It was all to do with that trolling, that rivalry. One day, the internet's a little different. One of her nieces, who was like a daughter to her, contacted me because I'd upset someone that she knew, and she's like, and I was always very I would not offend. I was very my jiu-jitsu on my heart on my sleeve, so I didn't want to offend anyone who was with jiu-jitsu, and I reached out and got talking to her and smoothed it over with the other person. And then she played Cupid with me. She goes, I've got this aunt. She's talking to me, and she kind of made a group chat with Angela and I, and then took herself out, and it was MSN Messenger back in the day. Yeah.
Where was Angela living when all this was happening?
She was living in Hawaii.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
So we were talking for a little while. I went to Hawaii in October, and we were married in February. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's a whirlwind.
And that was how many years ago?
That was, I should know the exact year. That's 2002, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
23 years ago going on too.
Yep.
Okay. And so the school just became a natural progression because that was your passion and that's what you decided you were going to do? Yeah,
in hindsight now, because I'm in a very different space now, I started teaching because I just wanted to train. That was, and even now, I don't want to say I don't enjoy coaching, but I love being a student. I love learning. I'm so much happier now that I'm not carrying the academy. And back in the day, it was just I needed to create a space to train just so I had somewhere to train, you know. If I came along now, I would never have started academy. I would be happy to train with these guys and, and learn their kind of thing.
Rach says a very similar thing often when we're on the mats and she's got the opportunity to sit and be a student. Loves it and lights up at the fact of the ability to be a student and continue learning as well.
And Grant's exactly the same.
Yeah. Okay, so what belt are you when you became I'll use words, names.
English ones?
Yeah. It Kaz English, so you interpret as we go. What belt, Luke, are you and Grant when you come into the equation?
So Luke had just got his black belt when I started training.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep. And it wasn't like I was waiting for a black belt coach.
Yeah.
It was just that the time happened to be right. As I said, we'd moved to the coast. We'd established ourselves, established our jobs, got a house, all this, that, and the other.
I think I was about 7 months pregnant.
Yeah.
And
Something
Grant's
like
like,
that.
I need to get out of
I'm
here.
out of here.
These hormones are killing me.
Yeah, it would have been 6 months.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Connor was basically born into jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
which explains a hell of a lot. We
Yeah.
should call him Bane. Yeah. So all the time that Luke defers credit to us as being around for such a long time and being experienced in that, this, that, and the other, while it's true, what people don't realise is that he's got at least 10, 12, 15 years on those of us,
Yep.
who are following in his footsteps sort of thing. So, yeah.
And when did you know he was the man?
Day one.
Yep.
Day one. I can still remember the person I was paired with to drill on day one. I can still remember people I rolled with on day one. I can still remember Luke's coaching. And at the time, Angela wasn't training. She was admin.
Okay.
She was admin. That was it. Luke was the coach. Angela was the person who would stand there with the spreadsheet, make sure you sign in, you pay your cash, because at the time, cash was what you did.
Yeah.
And all that
There
kind
was
of
no
stuff.
easy debits or
No.
monthly automatic payments or anything.
I was hooked on day one, and the culture was different. I was thinking about this last night in prep. And someone asked you about it on the mats the other day. I was talking to you, another black belt,
Yeah.
who trained with us way back in the day. I can reel off without even thinking. At least 6 of the guys who were on that mat my first night, first month, I can't even call them MMA guys, because in 2006, MMA was, the debate on the underground at the time was, what are we going to call this sport? We can't just call it UFC anymore, because there's Pride, there's King of the Cage, there's Cage Warriors in England, there's the Australian ones happening. What are we going to call the sport? No holds barred, Vale Tudo, MMA. But there were 6 guys on the mats that first night, first week, first month, who were fighters. Whatever label you want to call it, were fighters. Now, what attracted me to jiu-jitsu was watching Hoist in the first couple of UFCs, and I love that concept of the gentle art, being able to do it all through technique. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not a small guy, I'm not a weak guy, could go hard nose, bully style if I wanted to, but that's not really my personality. I love this idea of just being able to use pure technique.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got there, and one of the guys I rolled with was an MMA fighter, but he was who I drilled with at first, but he was only about 70 kilos. And he's back training again now, which is fantastic. His son trains as well. It's really, really cool to see, and he's going very, very well. But I'm like, this little guy here is walking through, and I can still remember we did an Americana that night, and I can still remember him going, now my left hand goes here, my right hand goes under here, my right hand grabs, and hearing that this guy is taking such a cerebral approach was fantastic. And then obviously Luke was fantastic at pairing us up with the right people. You don't go, hey, new guy, see that guy over there, he's fighting Hector Lombard in 2 weeks, just go and prep him. That was at least 6 months in that I got to that stage, but that's what it was back then, right? Yeah. And then being absolutely tied up like a pretzel by another guy who was sort of maybe 75 kilos and used zero strength whatsoever. And then rolling with Luke, and I'm like, there is absolutely nothing I can do to these humans. Yeah, this is exactly what I thought it was. This is exactly what I want to do. And I was hooked from then.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, Luke, you mentioned, or Grant, sorry, you said that Angela wasn't training then.
Nope.
But she did end up getting on the mats and training, right?
Yep.
So how did that all come
Not
about?
only training, she also earned a black belt.
Yeah, so for years she's like, not interested. You guys, you smell, you're sweaty. That was her thing. I'm not going to train. She did a little self-defense back when she was a kid. Mm-hmm. So she would have trained back at the original Gracie Academy where they had Hollis on one level and Carlos on the Carlson on the other. So, and then when they got old enough that the boys in the academy had eyes for them, they was like, right, you can't come in the academy anymore.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually wondered why there weren't more females like Gracie family females training.
Yeah, I think that was maybe that those girls in particular. There was a few of them that were like kind of rebels kind of thing. She was quite rebellious in her early days. But yes, they would come in and flirt with the boys and stuff like that. Not even training. They would come in and sit on the sidelines and wait for class to finish. And then I think Uncle Carlson said, "Look, go buy donuts downstairs, but don't come upstairs anymore." Yeah, how we got into it was she got into boxing first. So we went to Brazil a number of times, but we went in 2012. And I went there to do boxing training with Claudio Coelho. He's the boxing trainer for Hickson, Henzo, Hoyler. You go on the wall, there's like the names of all the great champions. Like people may not know the names, but they were like the Gordon Ryans or whatever, the John Jones of our time, sorry. And they would all train boxing at one place. All these people who wouldn't talk to each other in the street because of jiu-jitsu, they'd all train boxing because this one guy was so good. He's in the favela, in the slums, in an abandoned hotel.
And he obviously had a rule that you come in respectfully, everybody.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's an amazing guy. So it's almost like a charity project in this abandoned hotel that looks over Rio. And so I always wanted to train there. That was how I heard about it was Victor Belfort. That was where he was known for his boxing. So I wanted to go there and do my little instructor's course there. And while we were there, they got Angela doing the pads. And then she got a little bit more into it, and boxing was the gateway for her to get into jiu-jitsu. She's like, "Oh, while we're here, can you show me an arm lock? Can you show me a choke? And then let's wrestle." And then, went from there. Yeah, and then eventually she just got into it and was totally passionate about it. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the history of jiu-jitsu in Australia, and as Kaz said before, it's still in its
infancy.
When do you think that it's really started to gain traction? When do you think it really started to take off? Because now it feels like, on the Central Coast at least, you could name off like 8 to 10 jiu-jitsu academies. Up in Newcastle, there's multiple, on the same street. In Sydney, there's so many.
Lot.
There's 10 and 12 in one suburb.
Yeah, and we're
Sydney.
starting to see like real names come out of Australian jiu-jitsu. So in your memories, like when do you think you really saw that change start to take place?
Yep. So you have to give John Will credit. Like he spread jiu-jitsu a lot to begin with. Like when I started, he was a brown belt, I think, or purple belt. No, purple belt maybe. It's a long time ago. I just remember at his first seminar at Rutherford, and he was the highest in Australia, of course, and he was down in Geelong. So to train with it, I want to say purple, but I could be wrong. Forgive me, John. So you had to fly to Geelong to train with a purple belt. That's what I tell the guys.
Wow.
Yeah, when you walk into a room like this, you had to go to Brazil to get this. You wouldn't even get in America like a couple of black belts in a room.
And literally not that long ago, right? That speaks volumes.
And what did we have on the mats the other day?
Well,
I
said much the same thing on our open mat on Saturday, wasn't it?
90.
We had 90 people, 15 black belts from I think 7 different academies.
Yeah. It speaks volumes. You think about all the Australian sports that have grown, and I know you're a sports guy, but I don't know of a sport in this country that has grown that quickly.
Pickleball is the only other one.
Okay.
And I'm not actually, people, you say that and people think that you're being funny. I'm not. Pickleball's the newest trend in sports, and they claim in their marketing, so this is my PE hat on now, that this is the fastest growing sport in the world. But before that, it was MMA and Jiu-Jitsu. And it has been for a good number of years, and I think it's because of what we were talking about earlier. It's the first sport that is of the internet. It really was born of the internet and that generation. But just to piggyback on what you asked Luke, if I can, for a minute. So if you've got John Will, who sort of sat at the I won't even say the top of the tree, I'll say the other way. I'll say at the roots of it.
Yeah.
And then when I started, I think there were the 3 Brazilians in New South Wales. Yeah. Paulo, Bruno, and Marcelo. Mm-hmm. And they were sort of, if they were the first generation, then there was Luke and the guys who got their belt from those guys. Yeah. But that was largely still that very much, and you alluded to it before, boss, that teams based, you pick a side, you're, and I remember, I love Angela told a story one time about how all these guys, they go to the competitions and they have fights with each other and they think that, my gym hates your gym and this, that and the other. But then you'd have a barbecue with the Brazilians and there's the 3 coaches from the 3 completely different gangs hanging out and chilling with each other. But it was very much sort of that was how we're going to grow the sport is my understanding. That was before my time. But I think when it really proliferated was that next generation, when that second generation, yourself, guys like Elvis and Anthony and onwards, started producing their own black belts, us, the ones who still had that loyalty in that team. And I think anyone who knows us knows that we're loyal to the day we die, but could also see that to move forward, things had to open up just a little bit, and different competitions, not just federation competitions, other organisations started coming out, and people going, well, you know what, it actually is okay to go and train with those guys. Oh, I work with this guy who trains at that school, whereas in the past it was like you can never visit him.
Yep.
Whereas this morning we had a guy on our mats who trains for a different academy, but I work with him.
Yep.
So he came to visit an open mat, and for me, it was what I'd probably call the third wave of jiu-jitsu in Australia, when it really started. And that's also that exponential thing, one coach has sort of 3 black belts, they all have 3, and they have 3, and out it grows. So I think that's probably, and these guys have got a huge role to play in building that, So
how does that make you feel, Luke?
It's good. It's good to hear. Yeah. So going back a step, like you talk about this competitiveness and this mat culture, like how I believe we have a good culture, and I know for sure you guys do. That didn't happen. It was different 10 years ago, and it was very different 20 or 30 years. And a lot of it was trial and error. Like I just was coaching, had very good technical coaches and very good role models, but it was very different back then. And I don't know if toxic is the word you want to use, but there was we had this thing because, first of all, jiu-jitsu wasn't proven then, and we were training, and we were any night someone could walk in and say, right, I want to challenge you guys. That was the mentality, and it never really happened, but that was always in the back of your mind, right? If someone comes in the door now, you can't say no. If someone wants to fight you, you have to say yes.
Okay.
And that never really happened. But that was just like the mentality, and then this competitiveness, because now with the internet and with YouTube and instructionals, everyone knows what everyone else knows.
Yep.
But back in the day, it wasn't like that. I would know things that he or she didn't know, and I wanted to keep that under my sleeve until the World Championships. So normally how techniques proliferated was they would watch the World Championships afterwards, and they would spend a year, right, learning that move, working out how we're going to counter it. What's this 50-50? What's this spider guard? We're going to work it out what it is, teach ourselves that just by trial and error, and then we'll throw ourselves at each other next year. Whereas now, as soon as someone comes up with a move, before they finish the training session, it's on TikTok or whatever.
Or they're selling
and that's
it.
why they didn't have this, we can't train with each other because, I'm doing a disservice to my brothers and sisters. Yeah.
And it's so interesting because if you think back to then, so many of those techniques that we take for granted now are named after the person who first did them at Worlds. The Shaolin sweep, the Holeta sweep, whatever it might be. You'll hear me talk about Hoyler's choke. Yeah. Henzo was known for his arm in guillotines, all stuff like that. And it was because, as Luke said, that was being tried and tested in that lab for 12 months.
Before it was released onto the public forum.
Yeah.
So talk me through then, we're talking about competition and gyms against gyms back 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's predominantly men at this point, right? There's not a lot of females.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, 100% in competitions.
Yep.
I think the first time I saw women competing wasn't actually women; it was girls.
Yeah. Okay.
You'd have as.
So you're talking teenagers type?
No, I'm talking 8 and 9.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Okay,
So
really
as jiu-jitsu became, as those roots sort of took place.
Yeah.
And people realised that, hang on, it's a fantastic skill for kids to learn.
Yep.
There still weren't this culture that you guys drive.
Yep.
Women in jiu-jitsu wasn't a thing for the longest time. Luke alluded to it a bit with the family. But women in jiu-jitsu just wasn't a thing, full stop, because it was this testosterone-laden sausage fest where guys would go in there and try and beat the snot out of each other because you never know who's going to walk through that door.
Yep.
And there weren't a lot of competitions around. So your competition was the other guys on your mats. And you'd still be mates with them, but you'd give each other hell. And that idea of, training just hard enough so you could train tomorrow, that didn't necessarily happen back then. It was train as hard as you can so that everyone understands that you're the top dog.
So this is the life force in Australia, right, of building jiu-jitsu in Australia. Luke, was that the same overseas? You mentioned earlier on that you had travelled a lot overseas and trained with places and people overseas. Did you find that was the same back in the day, 10, 15, 20 years ago overseas as well?
With ladies, you mean?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly the same.
Okay.
Yeah, so you would very
So
rarely...
even though they'd been going for a lot longer,
Yep.
they still didn't have females on the mats.
Yeah, so America's, or no, not now, but back then we would say it's a decade ahead in terms of like, training and stuff like that. That gap's closed, obviously. But yeah, it was the demographics were the exact same. I mean, I remember Kira Gracie, who was like one of the first world champions in ADCC and the Mundials. Yeah. She was training. She would remember. She would have been a kid. She was at Marcelo Yogi's at Gracie Ipanema in Rio. Mm-hmm. And they're like, that's Henzo's cousin. It was just like a little girl. She would have been the only female in the academy then, kind of thing. But even in America, it was very few and far between.
When did females start kicking in?
It was, it still hasn't kicked in Newcastle. In my school, we don't have a lot of ladies trained that. And besides, my wife's a black belt. My stepdaughter trained and stuff like that. So I'm very pro everyone training.
Yep.
But I think it's when they started having jiu-jitsu dedicated for women, as like when they started women's only classes and that. Like I couldn't do that because I was working my day job and stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I'm not sure if this is off on a tangent, but like Hannah would say, if you want to grow any demographic, you need to have classes to begin with that are targeted to that demographic. Like if you want to have a lot of cops in your academy, you start a jiu-jitsu for cops, and then they'll get in, they'll see how cool it is, they'll see people are nice, and then they'll say, I want to get from my whatever belt to my next belt or jump in and stuff like that. And I think that's one of the many reasons why you guys do so well, is because you have that, the lady, like a wonderful ladies program, and then they just go, right, we're ready to train as equals amongst everyone. Yeah.
And you see that across veterans and ladies too.
Yeah, veterans, first responders and ladies, because they're sort of our targeted demographics that we have those special classes for.
Yeah.
But it is always a struggle. I find like, I think as women we tend to put everything before us. And I find it's a struggle to keep their motivation up and their longevity.
Which is so sad given how much domestic violence we see come across our country. But, America has 306 million people. They have obviously a higher percentage of domestic violence. And I'm not saying that jiu-jitsu is the bee's knees and it will save everybody, but by Christ, it gives you a fighting chance. So it's sad that we don't have more females.
I think it's interesting in that wherever you go, whatever it is you want to do, whether it's jiu-jitsu, whether it's a knitting club, you want to find like-minded people. Yep. And not just like-minded, but like people. And we've been talking with these open mats that we've run over the past week with other academies about how when all's said and done, if we're on the jiu-jitsu mats together, we've got more in common than we have differences. And I've had that discussion with some really cool people over the past few days that I didn't think I'd have that conversation with, and it's been fantastic. It really has. But when you'd walk in, I still remember when I started, there was a blue belt female, and she was pretty much it. Mm-hmm. She had a friend who she knew through karate who would train a little bit, but if that's the only person who's there, and when I started, there were only 2 classes a week, right? If you miss one of those because you've got to work or you've got family commitments or whatever, someone comes in on their first night, I'm the only other lady. I'm the only other person with green eyes. I'm the only other person with 6 fingers, you know. If you're in Newcastle, you'll find your people if you want 6 fingers. But that's
Luke,
the
you
thing.
can jump in and smack him at any stage or put him in the corner.
He knows he can. He's been doing it for 20 years.
I actually remember, because when you finally convinced me to come and give it a try, you were saying there's these 2 ladies that train, come and train. And that blue belt lady wasn't on the mats on my first lesson. And you were like, oh, damn it.
I swear there is.
I was telling the truth, I swear.
I still find myself some nights where Rach is the only lady on the mats, which is not common, but it still happens from time to time, like every jiu-jitsu community, we've got a really strong women's program, but there are going to be nights where there's only 0, 1, 2. I still find myself like, no, I swear we have usually got more girls than this. I promise. And but they need to see that for themselves.
So come on, females, let's get going. I want to take a jump back to lineage for a second. So we've touched on the importance of good coaches bringing you up through the sport. And it's very, very obvious to anyone listening and myself as well how passionate all three of you are about the martial arts that is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So there's no questioning that whatsoever. But let me ask you this in independently of each other. Luke, if you didn't have the coaches that you had, if you didn't meet the people you met, is the martial art itself enough? Would you have stuck with it?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think you can't separate it. Yeah, so because I was learning karate from books and stuff like that, and it didn't really, the clock didn't start until I, met these people and they started, shaping me and teaching me kind of thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And who do you think you would have been without it?
Nowhere good. So I was coming off being bullied, and that's still everyone has their story kind of thing. I got bullied very, very badly, so it wouldn't have ended up well one way or another. Like I could have gone down a number of bad paths kind of thing. I was a good kid, but just like to cope with these things. So without the martial arts kind of turning me around completely, it would I probably wouldn't be here. Yeah.
Grant?
Yeah, much the same in terms of bullying and that kind of stuff. Very much so, actually. But yes, I love jiu-jitsu. Yes, I do think I would have stayed with it. But I find my people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a huge people person. I very much prefer quality over quantity.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started with Luke, I found that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's why that's where I'll finish.
But if you didn't find Luke, do you think you would have just kept going with it until you found your people?
Yeah, see, that is hard. Once I got that addiction, and it didn't take long, yes, but if the first night was not as amazing as it was, and as I said, I can remember it so vividly.
Yep.
I can remember that, from laying out the mats to actually the colours of gis that different people were wearing. And I've got to say, it's a testament to Luke how many of those guys who were on the mats that day still train.
Yep.
Still train. Now, they've all followed their own paths, their own journeys, but most of those guys are still on the mats in some capacity. And a lot, and I don't even know if you realise how many of these, a lot of their kids are on the mats too.
Yep.
And not just as kids, but as fully fledged adults, because that was 20 years ago. And if they were kids then, these are guys who are now in their early to late 20s.
Yeah.
Who are on the mats. So I've kind of flipped off there. Would I have stayed? I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know.
No right or wrong answer, right?
Yeah, that's it. But yeah.
Right?
I reckon you would have, because I reckon you're stubborn and you would have found what you needed from it anyway.
But this is the thing. This is the thing. Sorry, before you go on that, you just said there were 7 or 8 academies on the coast. Now, when we started, there was one.
Where would you have gone?
Yeah, if Sean didn't establish that school, and then if you didn't sustain that school and leave it in good hands, jiu-jitsu on the coast would not be what it is now. We wouldn't have had 90 people on the mats. We wouldn't have competitions on the coast that have 300 and 400 and 500 people who are predominantly Central Coast people.
And you do in
if
that,
it wasn't
that
for this guy.
competition does come from different, people come up from Sydney. They travel far and wide to come to that.
But the majority are people who are doing jiu-jitsu on the coast.
Yep.
And
For me, I did it because Grant wanted me to.
Yeah.
And then I fell pregnant. So it was a really good excuse to stop.
Sorry.
And then I started back when, I just wanted to be with the family.
Yeah.
So for me, it was more about like not being left at home.
Yeah.
Where would I be without it? I would be in a very different place.
Yeah.
I think that I'd be well and truly very, very overweight person. I tend to lean naturally to that. So if I stop doing all the training, I, put on weight easily and things like that. Probably very unhappy in myself. I wouldn't have the confidence that I have, like the things that I've done because of jiu-jitsu has, allowed me to kind of flourish in other areas of my life as well. So
you'd have to have a job.
I would. I do have a job. I run a business very successfully. Thank you.
That's right. I wanted to ask that because I wanted to touch on, the the lineage, the legacy that you're leaving behind in regards to martial arts. It's a pretty big thing, as Grant touched on before. You've had a school, you've brought these people through your school, and not because of the martial arts itself, but because of the person delivering the martial arts. You've now got people like Grant and Rachel who are replicating that in itself and successfully, and their children coming through, and so forth and so forth. How does it feel to know that you were the start of that? That, you know, and again, you've done it because it was done to you and done for you. How does it make you feel?
You know, I can't take credit for that. That's all them. But the word the word that comes to mind, I'm not sure if this is the right word, but it's relief. Because it was not a burden. It was a big responsibility to carry. Not carry jiu-jitsu. I'm not trying to make it sound bigger than it is, but like what was given to me was so amazing. Yep. That now I've got my jiu-jitsu affairs in order. Like I've passed that on to people who are doing a better job than I ever could, so I can let it go now. Yep. You know, that's where I am exactly in my life right now. It's so, like I went from being, you know, when I started, I was a brown belt with white belts who could beat everyone in the academy. Then people started, you know, beating me in the academy. So I had people better than me in the academy. Then I had people teaching better than me, and now have people running academies better than me, and it's great. I can let it go and just be so proud of these guys and so happy that you don't need me anymore. So it's a good place to be.
And how does it feel knowing that jiu-jitsu has a really solid place in this country moving forward?
Yeah, it's great. It's great because I think, you know, I don't care too much about the championships and stuff like that, but if it can do for me if it can do for other people what it did for me, then that's freaking amazing. That's what it's all about, you know. All
right, I'll let you loose. Off you go.
I've been sitting here on the. Let me go. So I read a lot of Stoic philosophy, and a big part of Stoic philosophy is forget about legacy. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. You'll be forgotten in 2 generations, right? And we were talking about this with producer Matt when we were camping, and the example I used was Don Bradman. And I said, so Don Bradman was, for people who are listening at home, he's the Babe Ruth of cricket, if you're American.
Or Canadian or 20 other countries.
Yeah, he's your Wayne Gretzky, he's your Babe Ruth, he's your historical figure from the 1930s, 20s and 30s mainly, played a little bit into the 40s. Greatest batsman in Test history, finished with an average 99.94. And as a kid growing up, you all knew that. You knew that he lived in Bowral. You knew that he learnt by hitting golf balls with a cricket stump against a water tank. And I'm sorry, I cannot translate that for people who don't understand all of those things. But even now, when we say to our kids, ever heard of Don Bradman? They're like, who? Yeah. And that's not a flaw in our parenting. That's just the way the world works. Yep. Right? So legacy on a personal level, I don't believe in it. I really don't. However, there's North-South Jiu-Jitsu in New Zealand and in Newcastle. There's Hunter Valley Jiu-Jitsu in Curry. There's Iconic Jiu-Jitsu on the Central Coast. There's Beston Jiu-Jitsu in Wollongong.
Even to another extent, you've got Grafton.
You've got places where there's former students who have moved and have joined academies like, Steve's up in Grafton, so on and so forth. And people 2 and 3 and 4 jiu-jitsu generations down the line might not know who Luke Beston is. Most of those people at that comp I was talking about probably don't know Luke Beston from Bruce Willis. It's a hard distinction. But without Luke doing what he's done, none of those academies exist. There's 24 of us who got our black belts from Luke Beston. Now, not all 24 of those will go on to teach. Not all of those who do teach will go on to establish their own schools. But and there will be more. But that's a pretty good starting point for that branch of the tree we were talking about earlier to grow. Yep. And, there's a lot, it's funny, so much is said on the internet these days, and there's so much talk about the Gracie's this and the Gracie's that as people, as jiu-jitsu, as martial artists, as the whole thing, all right? Now, some of that I agree, some I disagree. It's all irrespective. The simple fact is, if Horian didn't come out and establish the UFC, and if Hoist didn't step up in those first few UFCs, would Jiu-Jitsu have broken out of Brazil? Maybe. But it would have taken someone pretty damn special to do it. And it would certainly be 10, 15, 20 years behind where it is now. You know, has the sport outgrown the family? I think it's fair to say on so many levels it has. But to not give those guys their due respect is just straight up ignorant. And all the people who do jiu-jitsu, even if they're not from a Gracie lineage, all the people who do jiu-jitsu around the world have them to thank for spreading it around the world. And I think in Australia, certainly in New South Wales, the number of people who do jiu-jitsu because of guys like Luke, who may not even know who he is, that goes into the thousands. And that means that there are thousands of lives that this guy has directly or indirectly influenced. You know, I try and say to him at every possible opportunity, you know, my entire family's life would be so different if it wasn't for Luke and Angela. You know, we're lucky that we got that brush to be so close with these guys, and I'll be appreciative of that forever. As are all of his direct black belts, you know. And you see what they're doing. But the thing is, we all do things different ways. You know, we take what we learnt from Luke, but the way Ernie runs his place in Hunter Valley, the way Josh runs Newcastle, the way we run Central Coast, and the way Huggy runs Wollongong, we all do things differently, but there is no doubt that we are all Luke Beston black belts because we took the shine from him.
There's fundamentals in jiu-jitsu, right? But then you build on that and you
but also
take
in
what
culture.
you want from it.
Also
Exactly.
in culture.
And as humans, you're individuals.
Yeah.
You're always going to put your own flair to it and do your own thing, but it's the core values that you've taken with it.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is so important about lineage. I don't say it from the recognition. I don't say it from the people down there looking back up through the grapevine or anything like that. It's the people that have started it, like yourself, Luke, that have been able to impart that kind of knowledge. And these guys do keep you alive. Sorry, I know you're standing here right now, still breathing and all the rest of it.
I just did my first aid certificate again.
Yeah. So you're safe. But I know a lot about you because of them. I've met you twice.
Yep.
But I could tell you a lot of things about you in the jiu-jitsu world because they keep that alive going forward. And you might be surprised just how many people down that chain do actually know because of the respect that comes from it. Lineage is a respect value for me. It's about understanding where the foundation comes from, where the core values come from, not just how to do an armbar.
Yep.
There is so much more to this martial arts than the physical attributes of doing it.
Yep.
So that leads me into my next question. Talk to me about the importance of things in this martial arts outside of the physical doing it. What do you get from it through your history of jiu-jitsu besides just the physical attributes?
Without picking one. So first of all, I can go, and this was back in the day when I started traveling, again, there was no internet. You got the Lonely Planet book at the news agency, and you went to the country you were going to, and they'd have two hotels. Imagine there's 2 hotels in Australia. You're going to pick one. But I'm very introverted, but I could go anywhere in the world, and I could be, within half an hour go to academy and have a bunch of friends, a bunch of homies, anywhere in the world. Okay, that's very, very cool. For someone like me who they traveled before and just would stay in the hotel kind of thing and not go anywhere. There's the Brazilian culture side of things. That's very different. Again, Brazilian culture is very different to Australia. I'm just thinking, as you guys were talking before, they have a lot of wise sayings. It's almost like Stoic. They were talking about recognition, and there's one famous saying like, "Today's news wraps tomorrow's fish."
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm not sure if that's in any other language, but I've only heard that in Brazil. And some people nowadays need to hear that, because if you're doing it just for recognition, that won't last long. Exactly what Grant said. And then like training in Brazil with the names on the wall, these were gods amongst men and women. But so it's what you can do for your, I guess, for your own life experience and what you can do for other people, kind of thing. Yeah, but the travel, the friendship, they're the 2 big ones. Yeah, again, but it all comes back to the physical side of things. I mean, going through that hard training that gives you the confidence with other things. Like, I'm not sure if this is what you're asking, but like I tell the kids, like, man, you've just had this other kid try and rip your head off in quotes. They're very good to each other.
Yeah.
You've got to give a speech at school tomorrow. It's nothing. It's it's like Disneyland,
Yeah.
So other hard things become easy in hindsight once you've dealt with this, like adversity, overcoming injuries, overcoming other setbacks and stuff like that. I'm not sure if that's what you mean.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%.
There's a line in Fight
Unity.
Club, right? And they're like, once you've been in a, and man, this is an entire episode for you guys on, is jiu-jitsu a fight? I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it isn't, right? But the line goes in Fight Club. Basically, once you've been in a fight, everything else in life has the volume turned down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of, is that the sort of thing you
Absolutely.
you get into? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, once you've been through any kind of extreme experience or just stressful thing or something that's very outside your wheelhouse, you look at the world through different eyes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a question I was thinking about on the drive here that I wanted to ask you both. Because you've both been doing jiu-jitsu for so long now, Grant.
You're making him sound really old.
Well,
I'm
you
kidding.
know,
I'm
I'm
kidding.
older than both of them, I think. So
I'm the baby at this table.
Yeah, I know.
Just let me comb the grey out of my
Yeah,
beard
yeah.
a sec.
Grant, 19 years, pretty
Coming
much.
up on
And
19
Luke,
years in January.
in your whole martial arts history.
30 odd years plus. Yeah.
So probably not something that puts you out of your comfort zone like when you were coming up through it. So what do you both do to kind of keep that, because it's important to step out of your comfort zone, right? So what do you both do to keep that personal growth going that may be jiu-jitsu related or maybe something completely different?
A couple of things. So first is the learning. And again, it's something we've all got in common here is we all enjoy coaching. I think you two are exceptional coaches. I'm not going to say for myself, but one, understanding that like anything good in life, this is evolving, and what was yesterday's news is just wrapping today's fish. So not getting caught up in the new hotness, but also learning what the new hotness is, and moving forward, and always learning and always understanding. It might even be as simple as a slightly different grip. We were talking about that this morning on the mat. I do the same technique. We have a Q&A after all of our open mats, and it's even better when there's visiting black belts. For one, they ask questions, which is a great example. But for two, they also give different perspectives. And we were talking about one of my favourite positions, and it's just a slightly different grip that one of the boys uses. And I'm like, great, I'm gonna try that now. So I'll go and I'll play my same guard that I always play, because it is easy to fall into that trap. But I'll use a different grip, and I'll probably get smashed a bunch of times. I could put that grip in my back pocket, but I won't. I'll keep using it until I can make that grip work. So that's the one thing I can do, is always find those new techniques to learn. But for two, it's really, really easy, and I've got to pull myself up on it sometimes now, only in the past couple of months. So I'm really conscious of it. I was chatting with another one of the boys. I was chatting with Joel at our open mat when we were both sitting out, and we were like, we're the guys who hang shit on everyone who sits out rounds, and here we are sitting out rounds. It gets really easier when you do it 6 days a week, 52 weeks a year, which we pretty much do, to go, I'm just going to sit there. I'm going to grab a rest round, grab an easier round. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. I'll say to my harder guys in the room, keep me accountable. If I'm not looking for you, come looking for me. And I got that from Luke. His line used to be, I've got to come and get my medicine off you now. As if we could ever administer anything. But it's making sure, and it's still got to be smart. There'll be days where I'm like, you know what, my back's cooked. I'm not going to roll with you because you're 50 kilos bigger than me. You do have to be more selective, but there's also days where really you just need to harden the fuck up a little bit. And so I make my guys keep me accountable, and if I don't find myself seeking those hard rounds, I'll make sure that at least a couple of the guys come and grab me for hard rounds throughout the night.
Awesome.
What about you?
So two things. One, I never was physically able. Like I've always been weak and injury prone and stuff. But wherever that was is falling off a cliff right now. I'm about to hit 50. So certain positions I can't even put my arm in anymore. So I'm having to constantly adapt to overcome with new physical limitations. Like first world problems, like nothing bad, nothing big injuries, but constantly having to I can't do that position anymore. So what can I do instead? and I want to keep rolling as long as I can. I'm getting towed up by, even white belt some days, just because some days it's very hard to move. But as long as I don't get hurt and I get a sweat up, I'm happy, because that's making Luke better than the Luke that stayed at home. So that's I'm going back to old techniques, finding new techniques which I've written off before, but make sense now because it's all I can do. So that's my evolution there. And then the other thing more recently is the security work, like doing a bunch of different things. There's all different facets to that industry. Doing that, that has, like, because if you go back a step from from jiu-jitsu back to martial arts back to self-defense, it's almost like competing isn't self-defense, but it makes you look at the world through different eyes. You'll learn things in competition you can't learn in the academy. Some of the security work is similar to that,
because you don't know who you're going up against.
Yeah. Well, there's all different kinds, like doing some like private investigator work and stuff like that. Even it's not even physical hands-on stuff. It adds to your overall, ability to protect yourself, kind of, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Can I ask, if you had a mum standing in front of you today and they said, little Johnny has been doing jiu-jitsu for a little while, but it's a bit hard, he doesn't want to come anymore and I'm going to let him quit, what do you say to that mum?
My answer right now, I am big on, it's not the right business answer, and I don't have any skin in that game, but I would say
forget business. I don't care about business.
I'll tell you what I honestly would say. I'd say that's fine. I've never raised kids of my own, so I'm unsolicited parenting advice. I know many good parents, and what they would say is, don't really force, if they're really not enjoying it, if it's not just, it's too hard, but if they really hate coming to jiu-jitsu, that's fine. But my advice is get them involved in some kind of sport, keep them active. As long as, like Hoyce was big with his kids that didn't want to train, you're playing gridiron, you're on football, you're doing this or baseball, but you if you're not going to do jiu-jitsu, you have to do a sport, and those kids turn out very well.
Grant, what would you say to the mum?
That was exactly how we brought our boys up. Neither of them could say they were ever forced to be on the mats a single session.
Yeah.
I mean, they can, but they'd be lying. Our rule was always
encouragement.
Our rule was always two, though. They had to do an individual sport.
Yeah.
Or an individual pursuit, I should say. I don't necessarily look at jiu-jitsu as a sport. There's that element, but again, that's a whole other episode series. Our boys had to do a team-based sport so that they would get those skills, interaction, collaboration, communication, conflict resolution, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And an individual sport where they could, and it's interesting. I'll use Connor as an example, and I know you guys are going to talk to him, and he'll probably say something completely different. But
we can get his perspective.
Yeah.
Early on, he loved doing jiu-jitsu and loved competing in jiu-jitsu because, and even when he was quite young, he had the head on his shoulders to go, because if I win, it's because I did it. If I lost, it's because I did it. So it was that accountability, and he wasn't that into team sports for the exact same reason. So-and-so didn't come to training, blah, 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 blah. Maybe my team won. He's the sort of kid who, if his team won but he didn't play well, he'd be down on himself because he holds himself to a higher standard. At the moment, he leans more towards his team sport. Yeah. And that's super fine as well.
Yeah.
It's also terrifying because at those the couple of open mats that he was on the past couple of days, the number of people who came to him, just, what the was that? It's terrifying. That's him half-assing in a good way, man, in a good way, but like without giving it the full commitment that so many kids do, because that's what we want. When all said and done, jiu-jitsu is a huge part of our lives, and probably we are, I don't want to say we are jiu-jitsu, but we all established very successful academies. We all, competed, we all taught, we teach, we do all of these things. You take jiu-jitsu out of any of our lives, that's a huge part of our life that is missing.
It's almost a huge part of our personality and who we are.
Yeah, and probably even too much if we're going to be realistic. I want in our kids, I want them to be well-rounded and well-balanced. And I don't want jiu-jitsu. I want the things that jiu-jitsu gives them, that persistence, that humility, that comfort in uncomfortable positions. All the stuff we talked about earlier. So the fact for me that our guys do have other things, that's what I want. I don't want them to be just jiu-jitsu. I don't want them to be just a teacher, just a bricklayer, just a doctor, just any one thing. I think in our society, and that's what we're doing in martial arts, and that's what so many people lose sight of now. There's plenty of academies out there who are great sport academies, and that's people say that jiu-jitsu gives you that. Well, the martial art does. The sport's going to give you the same as the sport of soccer or the sport of basketball or the sport of rugby league, which is all good. But I do think there's a bit more to martial arts, and that's one of the things that I always got from Luke. As I said, when he wants to do something, he finds the best he can possibly find to in that particular pursuit, whatever it is. Yep. And we're lucky in the martial arts. You can't decide, I want to be a great basketballer, or I'm going to go and learn from LeBron James. But man, some of the guys we've had the opportunities to train with over the years, we've got Josh Barnett coming in a couple of weeks. What the actual fuck? You know? World champions, legends of the game. My bucket list of people to train with now is very short because of all the doors that Luke and Angela have opened, and the access to these people that we've got. But as far as what I'd say to parents, which was the original position, there's what I'd do and there's what I'd say. What I'd do is, kid, if it's tough, you got to keep doing it, because the tough is what we want you to walk through. Otherwise, you learn to quit. But the flip side of that is oftentimes, and again, not judging any parents, everyone does their own thing different. And hey, there's no manual on this, you know. If the kid's got that attitude of, oh, I'm not enjoying it, or, you know, I don't want to do this, it's too hard. Apple, tree, far, sometimes. Doesn't matter what I say, because that's what they've learned. And we can, as teachers and as coaches, we can mentor kids. We can encourage kids, we can support kids, which is what we do all day. But the most important role models in 99% of kids' lives should be 100%, but the most important role model should be their parents. Yeah. So we're
a little bit different from all of you, because it's the one thing we've told our kids: they're not allowed to quit ever. Yep. So our three girls
till they're 18.
Until they're 18, and they can make the decision at that point. But having three daughters on the mats, both Matt and I come from a martial arts background. I was Taekwondo, Matt was karate. And we have said from day one, you will do jiu-jitsu until you're 18. Then you can decide whether or not you want to quit anything else. That's fine. We'll discuss it. We'll go through it, have the conversations. But jiu-jitsu was a
but
turn up every day.
Look at the role models that they have in you and Matt. And that's the thing. Look at who raising them.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it all makes sense. They're taught not to be quitters because mum and dad aren't quitters. Yeah. They're taught to show up to jiu-jitsu because mum and dad show up to jiu-jitsu. Kids will do more of what they see than what they're told.
That's it. Yep.
They will replicate. Do what they're told.
Well, you've met my three.
But the other thing as well with that, I'd almost, and I know we've had that conversation so many times, and it's one thing to be able to say that, and I know that's your stance in that. They did change up about 18 months ago, going from your kids.
What do you mean?
From training at one place to training at another. Yep. It would be interesting to see, if nothing changed, whether they would still be passionate about being on the mats in 4 or 5 years. I think they're going to be passionate about it. I think they'll stay on the mats till they're 18 and beyond. At Iconic, and it's not because of Grant and Rach, and it's not because of Matt and Kaz. It's because of, look at what they've built. Look at what our kids have built.
For sure.
All of our kids together.
And I think that's one of the things that I was getting to when I was asking you about what else do you take from jiu-jitsu that's not an armbar. It's the community. It's the people that you meet and the things that you get. We've spoken about it a number of times. We're a homeschooling family until next year, but that's a different story.
This year.
Happy New Year to me. Okay, this year. But the community that our kids gained from Iconic has built a friendship and a foundation in that regard, and they've been pushed by these people, and they've been pulled by these people, and they've learned, all those things that you talk about from other sports and group sports and all the rest of it, they still get from this sport. They still get from this martial arts. Irrelevant if had we have moved or not moved schools, it was a non-negotiable, and they were told that from day one. I would still have taken them. I mean, my kids know not to go kicking and screaming. They know not to argue on that level, and that's been the way they've been raised from day one. For me, I was raped at 14. My girls are never, ever, ever going to not be given an opportunity to fight. Pure and simple.
Absolutely.
So martial arts was a no-brainer for us. It was just which martial arts was it going to be.
Yep.
And what I will say about jiu-jitsu, that, you know, I'm the oldest in the room always, but in this regard, in present company, I'm the baby, which is awesome. I don't get to say that very often. But jiu-jitsu is the sport that allows somebody between their legs, as graphic as that sounds, without them panicking.
Yep.
It will allow somebody to come up behind them and try and drag them without them panicking. There is not a lot of other martial arts I can say will give them that, you know, most martial arts will create space. Taekwondo is a very big one for creating space. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's very unlikely that a perp that's coming up to try and grab one of my children is going to allow space. I want them to know what to do when somebody is up close and personal. And jiu-jitsu offers that. So it was never going to be something to negotiate over.
Yep.
And we're fortunate that they do now get the community and the friendships. And, I think you know, it's certainly Scarlett is going to go, I think, all the way. She wants it. She's feeding off it. Adelaide at the moment is just a ray of sunshine who likes making friends. So she's like, she gets to the end of a competition and asks her competitor, "Can we be friends now?" that's
she
her
has
take on it.
conversations
during the match to make sure they're okay. It's the best little kid. Ratty, you rock.
Yeah, she is a ray of sunshine. What do you see in this for kids? Like, I've just been very graphic in why my kids are on it. What do you think kids can take away from this, Luke?
It's what it gave me as a teenager. The same thing. Like, I had zero self-worth, self-value, whatever the thing is. Like, I was ground down to nothing kind of thing. And to someone who, turn that around. That's what I want for my kids. Like, whether they win a tournament or not, whether they, sometimes the parents go, they're not getting many submissions and stuff like that. So that's, to me, that's neither here nor there. If they can, after a few lessons or after a few months, the kids are this much taller, not because of how they've grown, but how they stand. That's what I want for my kids. I want them to do, to have pride in themselves and that worth defending kind of thing, that wrestler thing is, that's what I want for my kids. That, you have value and you are valued kind of thing. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, you're both amazing coaches. Yes, Grant, you are.
Really, all right, I'll
truly.
second
And
it.
look, I don't think anyone would disagree with that. You both just teach incredible jiu-jitsu in a really easy to understand and comprehend way, which I think that's what makes you such good coaches, is that
For adults and kids.
yeah, you can understand it. And yet probably, I don't know, like, you've had competitors come up under you, but that isn't your main focus. And there's a lot of gyms out there that really do focus on, creating champions. It seems that both of you, in your mindset and the way that you approach your students, is about creating champion people. People, really good people. And as you said, Luke, I remember I was a white belt when you had this conversation with me, and you said, after 6 months to a year of training, you just walk around with this like little pit bull inside of you, and you stand different, and you can just go, whatever you say to me, you can say to me, because I know I can choke you out, and just having that innate confidence in yourself, even if maybe you couldn't quite, but just believing that you could makes all the difference to who you are as a person.
And that's a huge part of society. And I was thinking, while Luke was sort of giving his answer, is so much of what people put out there these days is a front. It's a facade. They want to impress. They want to look big. They want to look strong. They want to whatever. I keep coming back to the martial arts side of things, and one of the biggest things I've learnt from Luke isn't just the jiu-jitsu stuff. It's all the other stuff that we bring in. It's self-awareness and understanding, and we talk a lot about, and I got this from him as well, is when you start off in jiu-jitsu, it's jiu-jitsu that works against people who don't know jiu-jitsu. That's your basic self-defense stuff, because most people move in a predictable fashion. But you've still got to learn how to read that. You've still got to understand, like when they blink, I've got to watch that video. But you know, one of the things that we take away is, you know, if you're in an altercation and we talk about having the Italian hands or whatever it is, speak with your hands up, you know, if they go look over their shoulder, they're probably going to hit you. Mm-hmm. If their hands are in their pockets, they've probably got something in their pockets. I think that one of the biggest things that you learn at a jiu-jitsu martial arts academy, and I am differentiating that intentionally, is how to read people and to read situations. And that's something that you also learn that in your upbringing, depending on where you grow up. And I'll give an example. Years ago when Rach and I were in Sydney, we were walking and I took us across the road and she's like, aren't we on that side of the road? I said, yeah, we're just going to walk on this side for a while. She's like, why? What? Well, those two smackies are about to have a fight. And she's like, I didn't even see any people, you know, but because and this is why you're so effective with the stuff you're doing at the moment, is because if you're a good person, you train jiu-jitsu so that you never ever want or have to use it off the mats. Right? Yeah, you're going to get those ones who come in every now and then who want to prove that they train UFC and go out there and do their sweet UFC moves and fight. But at least now there's an outlet for that in a sport.
Yep.
But you want to learn jiu-jitsu, and those people who walk in and learn it for self-defense purposes initially want to be able to go through life peacefully and not need to go hands-on.
Yep.
You know, and you have the personal security and the, you know...
there's a difference between confidence and ego.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And you have the capacity to see what's going on in a room, and you have the confidence, the self-confidence to go, you know what? What's worth fighting for? Not this.
Yep.
This is not worth fighting for.
Yep.
Okay, man, yeah, you can have my wallet.
Yep.
Cool. I can cancel all my cards. That's easy.
Yeah.
You know, touch wife, touch family. That's what's worth fighting for.
Yep.
And that's what the kids learn a lot of the time. And you guys see it.
Yeah.
You know, your kids who are elevated in sort of their anxiety levels or in whatever it'll be, they'll realise, oh, hang on, every time someone touches my face, well, that's annoying, but that happens at jiu-jitsu every Tuesday. That's fine. That's not a problem for me.
And you can see that even in Willow, who is our eldest, had mad anxiety as a younger child. And, you know, credit to Matt, who has been the primary homeschooler for the kids, because he has done a lot of work around self-confidence and things like that. But jiu-jitsu has been what has given her the ability to sit in the car if Dad's walked into the shops for a second and not sort of cower down in the footwell and be in tears when he's come back to go. She has evolved through that, and it's this that has given a lot of that to her as well, not just the ability to be able to armbar somebody.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's the differentiation between the martial art and the sport. And again, no shade on the sport. First and foremost, I'm a PE teacher. I teach kids sport every day.
And our kids compete.
You know, that's exactly right. You know, but if you're going to a place and you're learning a sport, that's cool.
Yep.
You'll learn your teamwork, you'll learn your persistence, you'll learn your dedication. You'll learn those kind of stuff. Yep. But will you get those other sort of more esoteric concepts? I don't think so. And that's not to say we're all bow to the wall, bow to your master, bow to the partner, step in, step out, that kind of stuff. But
in fact, we're probably the opposite of that.
in a lot of ways, but it's the ethos that you bring. It's the lens that we look at it through, which is that martial arts lens, which we then pass on to our kids.
Which is a lot of self-discipline. And so all of these words revolve around self.
Yeah.
It's the self-discipline. It's the self-respect. It's the self-confidence that if you're teaching all of those to a child and they're adopting that, they can then replicate that to their friends around them. You know, so if there's a couple of kids in the school and they're banging on, our kids are going to be the ones that are likely to go, let it go, it's not worth it, let's go over here. You know, and that's the kind of leadership that you want to see coming through schools as well.
Exactly.
That's super important.
A question that's completely left of center on that is I wanted to ask Luke about training with Alio Gracie.
Yep.
Can you tell us, I mean, that's pretty phenomenal. There's not a lot of people in jiu-jitsu that can say that they have done that. Can you tell us that story?
So there's 2 times I've trained with him. I'll tell both. They're both pretty cool stories. Like some of my favorite memories of all time. So trying to remember which one happened first. So there was Alio was in LA for Hoyce's rematch with Sakuraba. They were fighting in the Coliseum, and they would all go train, and I was not in that group that would go train. I was left with the wives, kind of thing. And
Because you're an Aussie?
no, I'm not a fighter. I don't have that, and I was too junior and stuff, and I pushed it a little too far, and that's another story. Once I got invited, I didn't want to get invited again. But that's technically it was.
Please tell us all the stories.
So yeah, we were back at Hoyce's house. The guys had gone to train, so there was Rodrigo, Hoyler, Aleo at this point was quite old. He would stay at the house, and Guilherme Valente was also there. He stayed there, although he's a badass too. He would have gone to the fighting, but I think he was taking care of Aleo and valued his time with Aleo, kind of thing. So that was so it was Guy Valente, Aleo, and I, and we were going through Hoyce's book, and it was the and Aleo's quite old at this point, very very bright, but he had Hoyce's book on defense, and he would open up.
Is that the one that we've all got?
No, different.
There's top position and bottom position. He has self defense, and then he has a whole book on like when you're on top, and a whole book when you're on the bottom.
Okay.
And you just open up at random, pick it up. Who's this guy on top of Hoyce? You know, how did he pass Hoyce's guard? And Gideon said, no, he's showing side control escape. Okay. Hoyce is on the bottom again. and maybe I'm exaggerating, but I thought it was quite funny. And then one position he showed it was there, and he goes, "That wouldn't work on me. That wouldn't work on me." And you have to get up to this point, like. Every time Ali would get up, it would be one son on each arm. He would get up. They would help him to the chair, help him sit, help him down.
How old would he have been?
Not long before he passed. It would have been maybe 90.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm like, what? Well, what would you do? And he goes, get down. On Hoyce's lounge room floor. And it was not long after Star Wars came. Remember Yoda came out with the walking stick? It was like that. He goes, yeah. They turn on the side. I wrap the guillotine. So he showed me like guillotine from side controls. You turn on your side. He goes, I'm gonna wrap your neck. And turned out it was one of his signature moves. And he tapped me, and then he's like, and he gets back up on the lounge. And then I remember like it was almost like someone came in there and was. It was very cool. So my joke is I never washed my neck again after So that was one. The other time was we were at his ranch in Petropolis, which outside of Rio. So this would have been the 2005 trip. So this is 2005 now. So I forget which order this goes in, but this is 2005. So still brown belt. We went out to there, spent the whole day there. He gave us a tour of the ranch. So he had his own valley, Nossa Valley. So it was like his ranch had a dam, had his dogs, horses in this like little valley, and it's all gone now. There's a big mudslide. The house and everything's gone, and it's a shame because it was a magical place. There was the house up one end, then a big corridor with like dormitories, and then as big as the house on the other end, it was like an I shape, was the dojo in his house. So he gave us a tour of that. But in the end, we sat out on the veranda at the end of the day, and I did an interview with him. I recorded. I lost the interview. It's gone.
No.
That's okay. I've got it, so it's good for me. But it was and in the end, he was talking about leverage, and he was trying to explain leverage, and he has his favorite one where you do the stick defense, where he's like, if you try and grab here, you hold as hard as you can. You'll never get out of my hand. But if you go up to the end, you lengthen the lever with one finger. I'll beat anyone. He had this saying. If you give me a long enough lever, I'll leave the world. It comes from one of the Greek philosophers, Archimedes or Plato, or one of those. So because I was reading one day, and like I was showing Hoyce, I wrote a letter for him, and I had that quote in there. And he goes, "Who's this?" I forget, it was Plato, Archimedes. "Who's this Archimedes guy?" He's like, "He got that from my dad."
Couple of centuries before.
I can hear all of that playing out. So this is my secret. I didn't actually come on here as a co-host. As a guest. I came on as just a third co-host because there's 3 people in jiu-jitsu I could listen to forever. I just weaseled my way in, and this guy's one of them. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you share with us, like, and both of you, well, I have 2 questions, really. I want to know, like, your top 5 people that you've trained with and learnt from and what impact they've had on you. But I also want you to share, like, some of your favourite memories coming up through jiu-jitsu. So, Luke, maybe we'll start with you.
Man, I really don't like to name names, because I'm always going to
Forget
miss
someone.
Yeah, it's
And it's always that someone who's like, why didn't you mention me?
yeah, and I will get home and I will kick it because it's been like any of the Gracies, you know, amazing, and then you know, a bunch of their first generation students, like they're the ones that are always special to me on the jiu-jitsu side. So it's you know, all of Alio's kids, Carlos's kids that I had the opportunity to train with, you know, from Carlson, I'll maybe go in the oldest ones because they're kind of the rarest. So maybe that's not, so I'm not going better or worse and that, because the family's competitive. We'll come back to that. That is what made them great. If I can go off on a tangent, that's one of the things.
Please go off on all the tangents.
What made one of the things that made the families great is it's a big family and they are super competitive. Like if you ask Hannah how many chin-ups can you do, this is back in the day when they were kids, or however many Huron can do +1. That's the family in a nutshell. You know?
I mean, the guys literally had the family champion where they would fight over it.
I've got the gi at home signed by all the family, and Andrew would take it around the room, and every signature had to outdo either in position or size or script had to outdo the other signature. So yeah, but it was like a nurturing competitiveness like you see with so many of the brothers in sport. But yeah, Carlson, back one of my first trips to LA as a blue belt, he was there before digital cameras and stuff. It'd be cool if I had a photo, but it was cool I didn't know got choked by him or anything, but he was there one day when I was training. Rayson, Reyson. So people wouldn't hear so much about him because he stayed in Brazil, but he took jiu-jitsu through a lot of the Amazon and places like that. If you ever see the photos, he was like, Angela called him the hippie guy. He's got this long, flowing blonde hair, and he was the peace and love guy until like he would be the first one though. If there was a fight on the street, he would be the first one in, kind of thing. Yeah, they're the two main ones. Alio, of course. I never met Carlos. He passed away kind of before I met Angela. Trying to think of the old guys. So, yeah, and then the second generation. So the rest of the family I got to train, of course, Hoist, Hoyle, blah, blah. I can't mention all names because I'll forget someone and I'll be in trouble, kind of thing. So, and they're all, you know, I just, starting from like when we first started, I was like, I wonder if I ever met that guy that's in the UFC. Wonder it'd be cool if I met him to like hang out with him and stuff like that. That's very cool. But you have like Pedro Sauer, amazing. Like he's one that always comes to mind. He's anyone who hasn't trained with Pedro has to train with Pedro. Like just every time he speaks, it's like poetry. Like, you know, you've got these little plaques on the wall behind you, all these sayings. Like every time Pedro opens his mouth, it's like, man, put that on a
He's another one of the three.
Yeah, I remember once, because you've gotten him out so many times to the academy as I was coming up from white belt to black belt. And I remember, you know, people would whip out their phones to kind of record the technique, and I'd want to whip out my phone for everything he said in between the technique, because what he says is poetry in motion. Yeah. You know, he'll show this amazing technique, but it's the philosophy behind how to train and how to be a good training partner, and, you know, how to approach the academy as a science lab, and, you know, all these things that we actually say so much at Iconic has come from the things that I've heard from Pedro Sawyer. So he's incredible. Yep.
So the other one we got to see a little bit, Murilo Bustamante. He was he was just the one that learned from the family kind of thing. So it was just, again, a totally different culture amongst that second generation where they started to open up a little, and they weren't like blood related. So the way jiu-jitsu came to them and the way they gave jiu-jitsu to other people was quite different. And so they were almost a little more open with their jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. You know, because always I think with family, you always, whether you try to or not, you're always going to have your family closer. You know? So, they were kind of like best of all, worst of none kind of thing. Yeah, all those kind of people. Yeah.
Grant?
So everyone's staring at me. Hello, what was the question again?
Well, who have been the most influential people that
it was all experiences, wasn't it? It was.
Well,
okay.
We'll come to that next.
All right.
I want you.
So this guy, easily, because without him, none of it. I said when you were down a couple of weeks ago, 95%. The other 5% has actually all been through Luke by extension. It is Pedro Sauer, who he brought to the academy. It is, you know, Sydney Silva, it is George Pereira, it is all these guys who I got opened up to because of Luke, you know. And the experiences, I'm going to go to the experiences, because when we travelled to America in 2015, that was, and I know you've travelled a bit more than me, and you've travelled more for jiu-jitsu. I'm trying to play catch-ups now, but the doors that opened and the relationships, you said that within 30 minutes you've got friends, and that is so true now, whether it's down the street, interstate, or international. And, you guys have talked about this on your podcast a couple of times.
Well, Kaz, because I haven't had as many experiences.
Some of my closest friends in the whole wide world and some people that I class as family now live overseas because I've trained in their gyms travelling around.
Yep.
That's exactly right. But I mean, after that, when we wandered into the academy, and then all of a sudden there's Ed O'Neill, and we're sitting in a room smaller than this, about the same size as this, and then 40 minutes has gone on, and he's just talking. And he's gone, do you mind if I tell you one more story? Sorry, I don't want to take up much of your time. We're all sitting there going, keep going.
Take all the time.
Days. Yeah. The quality of people that you meet in this martial art is fantastic. And I'm not necessarily saying as people, as humans, but in terms of, like Luke just said, as the generations have gone on, there's more of an openness towards sharing everything, technique, culture, attitude, the whole lot. And meeting so many people who you'd only read about in magazines or read about on the internet, and actually meeting them and training with them. And then as the world changes now, virtually hanging out with them sort of on social media and chatting with them, and then going sort of, next time you're in Australia, they're like, no, we're already coming to yours next time we're in Australia. Great, we're going to be in San Diego in a few months. Can we? It's like, yeah, you better be. Yeah. And all that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that you get, is those connections.
I know you've said it many times, and you're like, if you're into basketball, you don't get to connect with Michael Jordan.
Yeah, I said it earlier, but this is the time for it.
Yeah, but in jiu-jitsu, you can.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a black belt either to do that.
And
I was travelling around as a blue belt when I made all these friends and connections around the world.
Yeah.
So.
But the other thing as well is you don't get to go and play street ball on Venice Beach with some random dudes who no one's ever heard of who would smoke you. And we've been in academies where we've seen, we train in an academy where one of the best kept secrets in the world is one of Luke's black belts. Yeah. It's that easy, and I've been so fortunate to train with him, but there's people all around the world, and some people just choose not to compete. Or some people were competing before there was flow grappling and the internet, and everybody knew what was happening in matches, live streaming, or even weeks. I mean, we're talking about a time here where we would sit on Sherdog on New Year's Eve because we
What's Sherdog?
Just a website.
Okay.
Just an MMA website. And follow text round by round of MMA fights happening in Pride in Japan, because that to us was the most important thing in life. And so to go from that to now, someone like Majid can post a video and next thing we're chatting and going, see you soon, bro. That's...
welcome to technology.
Welcome to the 21st century, yeah.
So I know you've talked about, Grant, last time we had you on, your travelling to the States for your black belt test and things like that. And I just want to talk about it and give credit where credit's due, because you talked about Angela so much then, and about how she opened all those doors and made that trip possible. Can you guys talk a little bit on that?
Yeah, so if I can say, I was going to go back when Grant was finishing and say, I have to mention Angela, because if all those things, like, you can travel anywhere as anyone and meet the Babe Ruths or the Don Bradmans of the sport, but it helps if you know Angela.
Yeah,
Angela like knew everyone, or knew someone who you would do anything for, kind of thing. So, like, even now when I meet people, I won't say I'm Luke. I'll say I'm Luke, but I'm saying I'm Angela's husband, and that's normally is what. My friend. Yeah, so yeah.
You know how Kyle's Lisa's husband?
Stop it.
Sorry, Lisa's husband. Yeah, that's so true. And when we went to, like, the name, the person, who she's friends with. But when we went in 2015, there were 7 of us all up. So the 4 of us who were testing for black belt. 6 of us. The 4 of us, and then Luke and Angela. Angela organised that entire trip, didn't she? For all 6 of us. I mean, flights, accommodation, transfers, rental cars, opening up doors to academies on days that they weren't even open to go in and train with the 5th and 6th degree black belts under Hoyler, who would open up just to show us stuff, you know, from the self-defense curriculum or whatever, for no other reason that they loved Angela.
Yeah.
And she is one in a billion. You know, she is the most caring, generous, loyal, giving person. You know, people see that hard ass who takes no shit from anyone. That's growing up in the family, right? That's growing up in the family. Luke just spoke about how competitive they were. But the Angela that I know and love is just one of the best humans you'll ever meet. She gave me so many experiences in my life. I talk about how I wouldn't have had the opportunities without Luke. Okay, Luke gave us the opportunities. Angela made it happen. And the one story I always tell is the photo after the black belt. There was, I think there must have been, after the new crop, there would have been close to 90 black belts in the room.
Yeah, I'd say 100.
I reckon, 90 to 100 black belts. So we were stoked the other day when we got 90 people on the mat. Imagine that many people, and they're all black and coral belts.
That's insane, isn't it?
Right? Now, as you can imagine, they're coming from their own academies where a lot of them are the top dogs, and quite a few of them were the heads of their affiliations and this, that, and the other, and like people who in their own world are very important people. Not a lot of arrogance, not a lot of, hey, don't you know who I am sort of thing, but they're used to doing their things on their time. And everyone's standing around and we're trying to get a group photo. And all these black belts are just there and they're just having their little conversations. And it's like, this is not working. And just goes, "Oi!" Sorry for the levels producer, Matt, but it needs the volume there. I'll try and step back. "Hey, everyone, over there, now." And you stand there and everyone's just like, "Better go there now." And then someone said something to Luke.
Yeah, he leans over and goes, "Feel sorry for her husband."
I only found that afterwards.
Did you just smile?
Yeah, what can you say?
It was just so impressive to see this group of, I hate the term, you know that, but like alpha males, men who are at the peak of their lives, you know, the true ones. They don't walk around strutting it with the chest out telling everyone, but guys who are leaders in their field, just in a fairly, what was still at the time and is still quite a masculine field. And half of them didn't even know who Angela was, but just the authority she speaks, you know, everyone, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. How many bags full would you like, and when can I fill them for you at your soonest convenience?
How was her jiu-jitsu journey? Because she came to it after you.
Yeah. So been around it her whole life, but never trained on the mat. Yeah. So she started as my student, which was interesting. You know,
always is for a married couple.
Yeah. So very stubborn, very competitive. Not used to teaching ladies, which is something you have to appreciate, and it's a skill in itself. So learning as I go to like not upset my wife and have to be upset when she gets home, kind of thing. And she still had, even though she'd never trained, she still had very strong opinions on how training should be and stuff like that. Having like she used to run Helson's Academy in Hawaii and stuff like that, and so how the classes should be taught and yes, it was challenging, but very rewarding, you know. So it was like, man, I'm teaching someone from the family. Yeah. It's a big responsibility too. Like Hoyce and whoever said, you know, make sure you train her right, and she would, having said that, she held herself to a higher standard than anyone. She was like, you know, I want to be I'm a Gracie. I have to be with that title and that level kind of thing. Yeah.
And she always was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember the first day I ever rolled with Angela and I got goosebumps head to toe. I was in her guard and the thought, like, you know, intrusive thoughts, but it entered my head. I was like, I'm between the legs of a Gracie. It was very weird, but yeah.
Yeah, whenever we'd get there, she'd just punch us in the balls.
Is that a rite of passage or something? Yeah.
It was a Tuesday. No, but
that was her thing, yeah.
Yeah, I love Angela's jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
I love it because she's not a big person. She's a model.
Yeah.
You know, very slim frame,
Mm-hmm.
so technical, so precise with her movement, you know. And
how much
she learned
of
that from
that-
somewhere.
How much of that do you think is embedded just by watching and being a part of it and having it as a part of your DNA without, like, did you see as you started her journey and started as her coach, was she adapting really quickly because she understood the language of the movements and the names of the...
Yeah, I think on some level it was embedded absolutely, even in her subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because like we go all the way now, she can't brush her teeth.
Yep.
You know, but she maybe even now she can't do that. But there was times where maybe a year ago she couldn't brush her teeth, couldn't speak. But you grab her wrist,
Yep.
and she'll
And she'd...
do the move. It was just that ingrained in her. You know, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you think about, we see with parents, if they've watched their kids for 6 months, for 9 months, they jump on and they do typically pick up the fundamentals quicker because they've at least seen it. Now you talk about someone who's been in and around the jiu-jitsu sphere and the
Yep.
jiu-jitsu world for
From day dot.
30 odd years before
Yep.
they've stepped on the mat. Yeah, there's going to be some level of it in there
Yeah, of course.
for sure.
I want to touch on, I'd like to ask one question, and I know we've done favourite people and memories, etc. What has been the most beautiful experience? Just one. I know there's probably 1,000 and we could talk for hours about it. But if you were just going to explain, not even that you've necessarily been a part of, it might have been something that you've seen or a success story. What's been the most beautiful thing you've seen in your journey thus far in jiu-jitsu?
I'm going to claim 2.
Okay.
Damn it.
Never just one.
Give him an inch, she'll take
Yeah,
him
I
on.
know.
Yep.
I know someone else like that, Kaz. I'm
Look.
surrounded by them.
Luke's got 24 black belts.
Yep.
2 of them are women.
Mm-hmm.
And some people could look at this and go, "Oh, hang on," but they're the coach's wives. It's Angela and it's Rach.
Mm.
And I said to Rach that there was going to be one thing that was off limits, and that was asking us about the black belt test in America. We do not talk about that. We won't talk about that, the specifics of that. But we talk about how we test our black belts out here. And the day that Angela earned her black belt and the day that Rach earned her black belt, we used to do it in the cage upstairs, surrounded only by black belts, and they had to go in there and they had to prove themselves in a number of ways.
Yeah.
And each of those times, the attention to detail of the techniques that are what you could probably call the classical aspect of jiu-jitsu, that's to say the self-defense and the throws and that kind of stuff. The way those 2 ladies excelled, and it's not a comparison. It's not, you don't get an A-class black belt or a B-class black belt. You go up there, you pass or fail. You know, watching Angela go through it and seeing Luke when she went through it, and seeing all of the boys, because Angela is like our mum.
Yeah.
You know, and watching her that day, we all just sat there while Luke was taking her through the self-defense, just with that look of pride on our faces, you know, and all of us just had the biggest grins. When usually everyone else up there were like stoic, like, no, this is, I'm gonna have to do better than that, bro.
See you next year.
Shit, yeah. What are you gonna do next year? How are you gonna do it differently? But then it was really, really similar with Rach. It was. I know I had that look. I know I had that look, and I know I wasn't the only one because I was looking around when I wasn't entirely fixated on her. So the most beautiful moments are seeing both of our wives go through a lot of the similar stuff that we did, not on the day of the black belt, but for 10 years, for 12 years, to stay true on that path when they could have, like you said, could have sat at home, sat on the lounge, you know, could have focused just on yoga, you know, or just on reading romance novels or whatever it is. I don't know. But to see their growth for probably the 2 people who were nearest and dearest to us, that's been my most beautiful moment in jiu-jitsu.
Nice. Luke?
It's a hard one. So it's probably shaded by what we've just been talking about, but just thinking, like, I remember the first time one of my kids told me he'd choke someone. It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Because like the parent comes in and they're okay, and they said, I'll say Billy, Sally wants to tell you something. It's like, what? And they were worried I was going to be upset.
So this is in an anti-bullying type.
No, just
event?
at
Oh,
academy.
the gym.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And this is like they're one of my students. And they're like, what happened? Like that guy, like the reason like they started training, I choked him. I'm like, okay, and what did mum and dad say? They said they're good. So if mum and dad are good, I'm good. And they're like, they were so happy. And I'm like, man, like I've had something like that. Like I stopped that cycle kind of thing. And it's like, and that's happened many times, but that for me is, you know, if I could have that over training a world champion, you know, I'll pick that every day of the week. Yeah.
Yep. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Look, I just have one last question to ask, and that would be, if you could both pass on just one piece of wisdom.
One piece, Grant. One piece.
He's going to go, I'm going to say two.
So the third.
To the next generation coming through, or to that white belt who's stepping on the mats, you know, in their first week, month, year, whatever. What's you know, you're both so seasoned in this area, but what's your one piece of advice to see them through?
Don't ever think that you know it all. So the extension of that, and this is the same thing, Kaz, is always approach your training and your learning with the mind of a student.
Yeah.
Always.
Nice. Very good.
And you say that a lot in the fact that when you achieve the pinnacle, when you get to black belt, it's really easy to sometimes
Black
think,
belt's not the pinnacle.
no, I know. But a lot of people think that. And a lot
They're
of people
wrong.
get that belt around their waist and they go, okay, I don't need to turn up to classes anymore. I can just go train. I can just go to the rolling part, right? And Grant will always say, I will always make time when I can to learn from Luke's fundamental class.
Yep.
I will step into that class and I will do that class because without a doubt I will learn something every single time.
Yeah.
You know, it's really important. I agree with that. I would say, you know, to keep that student hat on is...
Well, they say if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
But people will often think, oh, I've got this...
Yeah,
I've got this
I've
black
made
bit of
it.
cloth now.
Yeah,
I
I've
don't
made
need
it.
to... I can just train. I don't need to learn anymore. I don't need to show up to class.
I am the oldest person in this room, and I've never stopped learning. I will learn something, and that's not just jiu-jitsu, that's life.
Yeah.
You have to get up and be willing to learn every day.
Yeah.
How about yours?
Story time? Yeah.
Yeah.
So mine would be take advantage of the opportunities. Okay. So I learned this, I made many mistakes and still do, but made this one thankfully really, really early on. So just after I met Angela, they used to have the Gracie cruise. It was you go to America, you get on a luxury cruise, and they had Alio, Horion, Hoyce, Hiron, Henna. So that'd be like having Henzo, Danaher, Gordon Ryan, Gary Tone, and something like that, like 3 generations of legends. And Angela's like, hey, the guys have asked, do you want to go on the cruise this year? And I think we just bought a house. I'm like, no, we'll save some money. Let's go next year. Next year, the band had broken up. You know, never another Gracie cruise. So I never got to train with them all at once. Never still been on a cruise in my life. And I'm like, I'm never going to let that happen again. And all these cool things that happen, because I'm the one that tends like, you know, having anxiety, I'll just stay home or I'll go next time. But that with martial arts, at least I never missed another seminar. And people, why are you going to driving up to whoop whoop in the middle of a, you know, whatever? It's because I'm never going to miss that opportunity again. And that's I think served me so well, kind of thing. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Seize the day.
Yeah.
Take every opportunity. All right, I have one last question for you all before we jump into Hope. I would like to know, whipping around the room, all 3 of you, what's your favourite position in jiu-jitsu? Go.
I had my mouth open before you said in jiu-jitsu. So I start with Rach. Mount.
Luke.
Story time, or is it a whip around?
No. Story time.
Story
Go for
time
it.
for you, sir.
So the classic, favorite submission, the classic Brazilian answer is the one they give me, right? But it's getting closer and closer to like underneath mount or something like that. So the story is like, and this is good news for like good things for people who are just starting out, how you train as you get older, right? So, and there's a saying from Dan Inosanto, another master, like every 10 years, you'll have a paradigm shift in how you approach your training. So your training at 30 will be radically different to 20, 40 radically different to 30, et cetera, et cetera. All the way up into like Grandmaster Alio, when he would spar as an 80-year-old, he would spar. but he couldn't bridge, he couldn't shrimp. You know, he would just spar from the bottom of the mount and defend his collar, and he would get upset at you. This has happened to me, but I've heard this story from many people. He would get upset at you and wouldn't train with you again if you didn't like try and choke him. Well, not if you were a jerk, but if you weren't legitimately trying to overcome his defense, you're wasting my time. Get me someone else. So almost that's where I'm getting to in my journey now. I'm constantly playing defense, but I'm learning to enjoy it. You know, so
That's almost like going back to the beginning, right?
Yep.
That's full circle in that life cycle.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Do I only have to pick one?
Yes, you can only pick one.
At the
Grant?
moment, then, I would probably say top side control, because it's leading to pathways for me.
Okay.
That's why. And I think that just in the last 6 months, I've kind of really tightened up my understanding of that position. So I'm having a lot of fun there.
I love the
working it
fact
out.
that I just asked 3 black belts and obviously degrees on the table as well, what their favourite positions are. And there was no fancy throwing out there big terminologies, etc. I love the fact that all 3 of you brought it back to very simplistic basics. And I said, I think that speaks volume about the people that you are and what you deliver in this martial arts. And I think if anybody's fortunate enough out there to have their black belts with the same mindset, they're going to go a long way. Okay. I would like to say thank you to both of you for joining us here today. And Grant, you weren't a co-host. You were absolutely a guest.
I just came along to listen to the boss.
Well, you know what? We were here listening to both of you. So there you go. It has been an absolute pleasure and an honour to listen to both of you. So thank you for joining us here today on the Gi Spot. As always, it's been lovely with you. Before we go, we are going to do Hope. I haven't forgotten.
Yes.
Luke, Hope is an acronym that my family and I live by, helping one person every day. Given the discussions that we've all had here today, if you could tell the listeners one thing that you hope they take away from today's episode, what would it be?
Overall, like at my journey right now, it's jiu-jitsu has almost restored my faith in humanity. I think if anyone loses faith in humanity, then, you know, I think there are good people out there. Like for a long time, I thought, no, you know, the planet sucks, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
But, and out of the hardest times, that's when I've had, like, especially since coronavirus and Angela and stuff like that, the worst things have restored my faith in humanity. So if someone else could have that feeling, like that's be my hope for them. Yeah.
Nice. I like it. Grant?
So we touched at one point about how things have changed and changed for the better in terms of training and being able to train with a bunch of different people in different academies, and not just when you travel, but the more openness of an open mat. And that's training, and I do think that there's a lot of value in that. I think, though, that, and so this might sound contradictory, but I hope people understand it, is find a coach like I've got where you can inherently and without doubt trust their process. It's so easy for people these days to go, oh, that guy just won a world championship, so I'm going to go train with him. That guy's really good at that position, so I'm going to go train with him. And you lose continuity and you don't have a home. And so you've got really cool, I call it trick jitsu. You've got really cool positions, but my journey so far has been 19 years, and it's far from over because I've had a coach from day one who I absolutely inherently trusted, because I know how he invests in his own learning and how invested he's been in every single student who has ever walked through his doors.
Nice.
That's my hope.
The conversation.
Follow them, I dare you.
Yeah, I know. And, you know, I make these things up on the spot. I don't think about them beforehand, so my mind's been racing for the last couple of minutes. But the conversation I had with someone the other day at one of the open mats was, and he trained at Wyoming, and we were talking about the training mat and how back then it used to be you had to win the night or you had to win the matches because it was a different mentality. You had fighters in the room and that sort of thing, and how these days it's changed so much to be now your training partners are your most valuable asset. And so the way you train is different. because it's not about winning the match anymore. It's about looking after your training partner as the most important person in the room. So my hope is that, you know, if you don't have that training environment, help create it. But if you can't help create it, find somewhere that has that mentality, because your training and your longevity through this martial art will be so much more rewarding, so much better for your body and your mind and your soul and all of those things if you have a coach that has that philosophy like I've had in both of these guys, but also the training mat that comes up together under that mindset.
Nice.
So that would be my hope. What's your hope, Kaz?
Look, I asked about the position and favourite positions because I wanted to showcase what 3 really high up experienced people that have passion for this martial arts will respond with. There was no ego in that response. There was no ego on the table at the time. My hope is that people understand that this can give them and their family so much more than just positional and self-defense. There is a community out there that will embrace you. There are people that will help you and befriend you and, you know, teach your children. You're only going to get all of that if you find the right coaches. And as beautiful as this martial arts is, as much as these positions can give you and the self-defense aspect and all the rest of it, you have to find the people that are passionate about it. And so if these 3 people sitting with me today give you nothing, give you the insight to find the coaches that are delivering the passion for this martial arts. That's my hope for everybody out there listening today. Find people like you.
Aw, thank you.
Well, I've got 3 kids that I'm entrusting them with you. And they're getting what they're getting from you because you entrusted in Luke. Yep. So there is this big knock-on effect. I don't say it for Matt and I say it from the perspective of my children. I know what my kids take away from Iconic. Ooh.
I took them to the bottom of a river yesterday.
You did. And, you know...
That'll lighten things.
Yeah, thanks. Because Scarlett's immediate response was, when can we go holiday with you again so that you can teach her more? That's not something that my autistic kid would come home and say. So... I don't know, there is nothing else I can say. Find the people that will give you passion about what they're teaching you. And that's what will keep you coming back every week. That's my hope. And we have to stop now because I fucking hate crying and stop it.
Rach, you better do the outro.
Yeah, thanks. See?
It just dawned on me that you only cry when Grant comes on the
Oh,
podcast.
look, I know, you're not allowed back ever again.
Find people like me, ladies and gentlemen.
And I didn't get to say fucktards once.
Oh, there she goes.
Gee, it's shame to stop recording already.
All right, we're out. If you like us, share us. Don't make me cry ever again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you so much for coming on today. And I believe it to the bottom of my soul. This will not be the last time we'll see you on here. You are a wonderful storyteller. And Grant's brother Jay said to me the other day about how he wished you would tell more of your stories. And when I said that you were coming on the podcast, he was just like, that's going to be so good. Tell him to tell all the stories. So I know that we've only merely touched the very tip of the iceberg as far as your stories and your experiences. So I know I would love to have you back.
You
on
cannot
again.
call this episode Touching Tips, okay?
Yeah, we can. Absolutely, we can.
Actually,
Oh, shit.
no,
You've heard what the gay spot's called, right?
touching tips and other tricks.
And can I just say, while we are still recording, Luke, can I have it on record? Will you come back and join us again?
100%. Yeah.
Excellent.
Did you have fun today?
I did. I learned about myself, like thinking about the questions. That they're very good questions. So I was like, wow, it wasn't what I was expecting. And I'm a lot to think about when I go home. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you, Grant, as always, a
Always
regular.
fun.
And
No, you and I will have discussions later. No more tears.
I always have.
Righto.
and thank you. As I see you next week.
This podcast is a My Broken Soldier production.
And brought to you by Iconic Jiu Jitsu.